District lines. Dubliners for Bradford 2025. BD16, The Hand. The gang's last summer at Cottingley Village Primary School was hot and dry. The blistering breeze stole perspiration without cooling. We laughed at the kiddies running around, shrinking their brains in the burning sun. From our vantage point at the edge of the school field, the boundary of our kingdom, we watched. Imran, Maria, Nikki and I were pretty tight then. We'd started to pair off at lunchtimes a few weeks earlier, wandering to the edge of the school field to sit and watch. The flattened white grass dimpled our elbows as we lay down and rested, chins in hands. I'm not sure how it happened, but we began to sit on each other's backs, Maria and Imran, Nikki and me. It was new, this physical contact with a girl. Like bundling with mates, but different. Something underlining our relationships. I was content, in final year, top of the tree with Nikki. As we watched, we commented, mainly on the fights between the younger kids, behaviour we were above. Several times a day, a ring of chanting contained two scrappers. The loser, pinned down, might submit before a string of spit was dribbled onto their face. Sometimes we'd comment on relationships. Nikki mentioned John's single status a few times as he chatted to girls 100 yards away, but we often lapsed into silence, feeling hot sun above, dry earth beneath, contact between us, and distance from others. One day I was late finishing lunch, so as I sauntered up to the field, the others were already in place. Imran and Maria, Nikki and John. John was lying there with Nikki on his back. Her hands rested below his shoulder blades, giving the light caress I should have been feeling. One pair of blue eyes and one pair of brown contemplated my approach. They looked as one. I didn't want to see. I took off my glasses and pretended to clean them on my top. I felt them still watching, so I veered away toward the big oak in the corner of the field. Myopia saved me from all but that first glance, but it had revealed a desperate tableau. I knew my status had gone. I walked and fought the tears I felt they were all looking for. As soon as the tree hid me, I shouldered it for support, bowed my head, and saw the dirt splash dark with my distress. My first betrayal. I was glad no one came to see how I was. I didn't want them to know my pain. I didn't want to try to hide it and say I was okay. As I grizzled out my grief and sucked in my solitude, I wanted to smash them. Not just Nikki and John, but all four of them. In the shade, I wondered how I would make myself feel better. After some time, I decided I needed them to feel worse than me. When my jagging breath steadied, I looked around. I saw the 3-strand wire fence surrounding the field, with the dike just beyond. The dike drained rough ground my dad said used to be a tip. The water in it was stagnant black beneath bubbled scum that looked like orange curdled milk. The curd held fast many items thrown there for fun or cruelty. Footballs and tennis balls, school milk bottles. Almost out of sight on the far side, an old glove was stuck upright with fingers and thumb above the mush. I guessed the black water's stinky gas had collected in the fingers to raise it up. The glove appeared to be reaching for the long grass overhanging the far bank. I wondered whether I could push John in to join the rest of the rubbish, but he was stronger than me. I needed to be smart. By the end of lunchtime, I had a plan. My tears had dried, and I was ready to go on as if nothing had happened. We remained in the same seats in class, John alongside me. "Saw you hanging by the big tree at lunch, Marcus," he smirked. "I was talking to Nikki about you. I thought you were her boyfriend, but she says you're just a kid." I coloured up, but didn't rise to the bait. "I was watching the hand in the dike." "What do you mean, watching the hand?" "Oh, well, that would be telling," I teased. "It's a secret, but I'll let you in on it if you promise not to tell." "Bullshit." "Okay, your loss." John couldn't resist. After school, as well as crowing over Nikki, he bugged me about the hand. I told him I'd show him the next day if he came to the dike with me at lunchtime. John agreed. I warned him to make sure he locked his doors and shut his windows overnight. Or what? John sneered. Or the hand may pay you a nighttime visit. It mostly stays in the dike, but it likes to visit those who have just learned about it. I've kept my window shut and door locked every night since I found out about it, but I can relax now because I passed it on to you. Ah, bollocks, you're pulling my plonker, mumbled John. I smiled at him, wishing him a hot, fretful night. The next day John arrived at school with shadows under his eyes. I snuck up behind him and grabbed his shoulder. "It's the hand," I whispered in his ear. "Did you sleep all right, mate? You look rough." "Get off." John squirmed and marched off. At break he was thick with Imran, Maria and Nicky, so I was worried he'd spill to them. My fears were confirmed when they surrounded me at lunch. "Never heard anything about a hand before, Marcus," said Maria. "What's going on?" "It was meant to be a secret, Grass," I hissed at John. "Leave him alone," said Nicky. "Look, if you all need to be on this, I'll show you. But no telling teachers, okay?" They agreed, and we finished our food, all except John. 5 minutes later we were under the oak, peering across the dike. John was holding Nicky's hand. I stirred the orange curd with a stick, and black slime oozed up, along with a foul smell. "Ugh, it stinks of rotten eggs," Nicky spat. "More like your rotten guts, Imran," teased Maria. John just raised a hand to his pallid face to stifle the odour, and kept staring at the surface of the dike. "This stink is from everything that has fallen in," I explained. "Nothing gets out. Don't get too close or it'll pull you in like quicksand. I reckon that's what happened to that missing girl last winter, because I can see her hand over there." "Where?" croaked John. "At the far bank, next to that top deck can. See it?" Everyone peered and went quiet. "Bullshit, it's just a glove," said Imran. "That's what I thought, but I watched it for a long time yesterday, and I swear it was moving. I reckon the dike has dragged that girl down, and now she's all rotted away, her skeleton's coming back up, still dressed." "What do you think, John?" I rounded on him. "Has she started to climb out? Did she force you to think about her last night? Does she want you to save her?" "Stop it," whispered John. "Stop it, stop it, stop it! You did this! You forced me to think all about her last night! You made me have nightmares about her! You bastard!" "What do you mean, John? How can I control what you dream about? I'm just a kid," I said, catching Nicky's frown at John as I did. "I guess the phantom girl might have that power, though. What do you reckon?" John's wide eyes were locked on mine as I spoke. He started welling up then, his tears there for Nicky and the others to see. "I can't stay here," he murmured, and walked off. "You moron, Marcus," Nicky hissed. It hurt more that she ran after John and put her arm round him as he trudged away. "Pillock," said Maria as she and Imran followed. I was left alone by the tree again. I got back at John but pushed him and Nicky closer. No one else believed the phantom girl tale, but I did feel better, just for having done something. On my own again the next day, I got in a kick around with some old mates at morning break. I didn't care about the heat. "Not seen you for ages, Marcus. Can I be your girlfriend now?" was the ribbing I got, but it felt good to work out my frustration playing footy. I glanced up the field a few times and saw the four together. There were also a few kiddies under the tree by the dike, but it didn't seem remarkable at the time. After break I got stuck into work like I had the footy and started feeling better. At lunch I wasn't keen to get out, so I focused on enjoying, not wolfing my food for once. As I ate, the canteen seemed frenetic. I had slowed down, but had everyone else sped up? Kids were gobbling their food and rushing out. Others were coming in and chattering in their mates' ears to prompt them to split without clearing their trays. Mr. Shelton was almost hoarse from shouting at kids to clear up. When I started my semolina and rosehip syrup, I was the only kid in the canteen. I reckon there had to be a monster scrap about to start, so I guzzled the pudding and strode out. The scrap was over by the dike, under the tree. It looked serious. Kiddies shot from the crush in twos or threes in tears, but were then pulled back by the blood and violence, I thought. I couldn't hear the usual soundtrack of scrap, scrap, scrap as I drew nearer, though. This was odd. There was a buzz, a murmur in the throng, and I kept on hearing the hand and the girl as I pushed through. "What's going on?" I asked the kid nearest to me. He stared at me with glassy eyes. "There's a girl's body been sucked into the dike. She's trying to climb out, and you can see her hand. I'm scared." Someone shouted, "It's moving! It's coming!" And there was a stampede. High-pitched screams soundtracked wild eyes searching past me for space to run to. Infants were knocked down in the surge. I heaved one up by his T-shirt and he just ran. No pause, no thanks, not even a look back, just terror. This was amazing. 100 times better than freaking out John. I'd freaked out the whole bloody school. The rest of the day was a dream. John told me he'd threatened Tessa, his little sister, with the hand when she was bugging him over breakfast. That had lit the fire that whipped through the school in the morning and burnt everyone by lunchtime. We had a good laugh at this as we painted hands rising from the dike in art that afternoon. I decided John was okay, really. It was up to Nikki who she went with. I could cope. It had been more than a day since our split after all. The next day was quiet at school. There was loads of space as we sat cross-legged in morning assembly. Old Mr. Russell, the headmaster, although still intimidating, was looking haggard. He stood at the front and started talking about the missing girl. I thought this was the usual stranger danger talk. I didn't get it until he said, "There are rumours the girl's body is near the school and I want to get to the bottom of it." Suddenly a dozen hands shot up, accompanied by the sir, of squirming children dying to impress with their knowledge. Soon an infant was spilling the beans. "This is very serious," said Mr. Russell. "The police will be involved. I want everyone who has actually seen the hand in the dike to stand up." Hesitantly, about half a dozen pairs of spindly legs scissored up until their owners, Tessa included, were standing proud of the attentive eyes on them. There was silence until everyone had returned their gaze to Mr. Russell. Then he erupted. "Every single one of you standing will see me directly after this assembly," he boomed. "I have been woken through the night with calls from dozens of parents whose children have refused to go to bed, who have woken screaming from nightmares, who have wet the bed due to these rumours. I must tell you these rumours are totally false. I will find out who started these rumours. You scaremongers will tell me, and the instigators of this outrage will be punished." This was no laughing matter. Much worse than being chased by any phantom girl was getting on the wrong side of Mr. Russell. Although he didn't know it yet, I was firmly in his sights. Later that morning, John was called out of class, and my guts churned from that point until I saw him at lunch. "What happened? What did Tessa say?" I asked. "The little cow ratted on me," said John. "Her Cindy's a dead meat." "What did you say?" "I told Russell it was me. I'm not going to grass a mate, am I?" I'd completely forgotten Nikki. I might have been in love with John at that moment. John's punishment was to clear rubbish from the dike after school. I nipped home, told Mum I'd play out, then wandered back into school to watch John. When I got to the dike, he already had a bin bag full of stinky flotsam, and he was leaning out to pluck the glove from the curd. "Watch the phantom girl doesn't get you," I shouted. John looked up and laughed at me, arm outstretched, and then there was movement. The glove seemed to glide to John's open hand. He let out a low wail when fingers closed around his wrist. His bulging eyes locked on mine. He couldn't look at the horror possessing him. Already precariously balanced, he was off his feet in a second and was swallowed, arm, head, then body under the dike's slimy crust, into the black. Silence. Stench. The curd dimpled and rolled, the damped signal of thrashing limbs beneath. John broke through the surface and screamed, with black slime running into his eyes, nose and mouth. That jolted me into action. I ran, sprinted into the school buildings, battered the doors, windows, screamed for help. Then Mrs. Rahman was running ahead of me back up the field, Doc Martens pounding and yellow dungarees flapping. Before I had time to warn her, she had leapt in and waded out until she was chest deep in the dike, using her arms as feelers, crouching down to her neck. "Yes!" she shouted, then submerged after something she must have felt. Bubbles burst to surface for a while, then stopped. I started to vomit from the smell or the fear. Then Mrs. Rahman resurfaced, dragging John's limp body from the morass. Between my wretches I could see John's torso was clamped tight by the arms and legs of another body. A girl with bloated grey skin and lank, matted, long black hair. I recognised her gloves. A duffel coat, jumper and skirt were pulled at by the dyke as Mrs. Rahman emerged. When she laid the bodies on the warm grass, the girl's head swung around at an impossible angle to face me. Two grey lids pulled back revealed her eyes. The world spun and went black. A week indoors. Lots of questions. John had been revived almost immediately by Mrs. Rahman. I played dumb about the girl grabbing and clinging to him. So did he. Mrs. Rahman must have too, or perhaps she didn't notice. Or maybe I imagined it all. The police were satisfied that John just fell in, and that Mrs. Rahman accidentally pulled out the girl's body when she retrieved John. I was a bit of a hero for getting help so quickly. Imran and Maria, Nikki and John, Helen and I surveyed the shimmering field from its edge. Police tape still cordoned off the dike. All the kids were back at school and playing in the field again. Helen had asked whether I was okay when John and I returned to school the week after we found the body. After a bit of chatting, we joined the other four at lunchtimes at the edge of the field. John and I hadn't mentioned the grasp of the hand through all of our questioning by the police and teachers. I had a new mate and a new girl. Summer holidays were just around the corner, and we would leave to work our way up from the bottom of middle school. The gang was now 6. 2 of us would always stay away from any water we couldn't see the bottom of.